more to marketing. Welcome to More to Marketing, the podcast on marketing, product, and everything in between. I'm your host, Susan, and today we're going to be talking about service marketing and a few other aspects around this topic. I'm really excited to share that I have a specialist in this area on board today. I have Ben. Ben has decades of experience in service product delivery and also product management. He's definitely an expert in this field. With an amazing background that also goes all the way back to arts, he uses his creative perspective to help lead business transformations. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Susan. Nice to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much for being here. Why don't I throw to you and you tell us a bit more about your background?
And like you mentioned, I come from arts. I did a fine arts degree, and that was called back in the day called intermedia. Art was what I progressed in, and that's what you would see nowadays as light, installation, sounds, movement, all that sort of modern art. Back in my day, it was quite controversial. But it all deals with some of its human emotions and thinkings, and the art that I went through is the theory of art and why and how you practice it. I also did a lot of social studies and did psychology and human behavior. And one of my biggest topics I did was feminist studies, which was art, gender, and representation through the ages. So that was where I started. I went into makeup, TV, worked in bars, nightclubs, and a lot of retail as well, merchandising and visual merchandising here in Australia. I'm from New Zealand originally. And then I fell naturally into, I went into being an accountant and doing payroll and HR, and also then I sort of fell into a job at AMP back in 2010. And that was just to be a content person to do a website migration. And from there, I always love learning, and things that always interest me is, once you learn how it's done or why, and some of that's actually the human psychology behind it. So I was learning, why are you doing this website? Why are you promoting things? Why does a marketing manager want to have this component work this way? And I've got a kind of brain that goes from A to Z in all various ways. It doesn't do a linear, it goes up and down, and I can straight away see what you want way from at the end in Z, but sometimes I have to let you go from A, B, C, D, E, because that's the way you work. But it's always interesting. So that led me into product management. And I've always been customer first. And when I talk customer, I don't always necessarily mean the customer outwardly from the organization. It's the customer inwardly. And that's how I sort of really, in a very natural way, got into service design. I've never been a full practitioner of it or learned it. I've learned the practices I've gone along, or learned from really good service design or people that think customer. And that was a big challenge, obviously, at AMP. I've been at Aware, Super. I've worked in financial advice. I've done administration systems, trust, learnt, back-end PAS systems, back and forth, and content management systems, Adobe. One client I've recently worked with, which was really amazing, was Modibody, and that got me back into e-commerce, where I'd come from originally in retail and manufacturing. And again, I used service design thinking through that while I was hired in as project management and doing some product. I really pull on the service design area because that enables a business to move forward, I find, often more than sometimes product.
I think the amazing thing about your background is all of it comes back to people and how people are involved in all these different processes, and then being able to utilize that now in your roles that are more focused on product, where it's management or service delivery, that you're really bringing it all together because you can see all the different aspects that other people might have blinkers on for.
I mean, and I think I learned a lot of that actually going back to merchandise planning and visual merchandising at Myer and David Jones. And part of that is, you're always planning ahead, 5 years ahead with merchandising. Visual merchandising is, for those that don't know, is the output that you see when you walk in the store, how things are laid out. That's a way to make things sale. But merchandising is planning, looking at costs, whether what human behavior is doing, what stores. And I learned from Maya and a really good buyer at David Jones, Kate, and she was in the shoes, but I really learned about why you buy, where you shift things, and how you can look at it. And that, again, you're looking at resourcing, you're looking at who the staff are, and in the packing areas, who can enable things, how many people on the floor, what's the weather in Canberra compared to what's the weather in Queensland. So, you're not going to leave heavy jumpers that didn't sell in winter, because there's always going to be one or two up in Queensland when, you've got sales and it's going to really sell down in Canberra. So how you move stock, how you look at it, and taking all of those things. I've always taken an experience from a different industry into every industry I go, because they're all relatable.
Yep, definitely. All that cross skills, definitely very valuable.
Yeah.
So I've got my big question I have for you to lead our discussion, because we're going to be having more of a debate style discussion today. What's the key difference between product management and service delivery management? What's those crucial things that we need to understand of those differences?
I think for me, the difference between them is product management is about your product, and product management can go in many ways. Often you'll hear there's a product growth manager. There's all the different types. You've got product owners in some industries where they're looking just at delivery of a feature. They do service design which is in there, but it's often left into the UX world. And UX doesn't do full service design.
Agree.
It is often all of these, both of them take an element, whether it's I'm to create a new product or I need to enhance the product, and they'll look at what the customer is doing with that particular product that they've already defined as a goal. Service design can take that product, but it looks outwardly and inwardly and in all depths. So it looks across what you call channels. So if our customers say you want to build a booking tool online, it's not going to just look at the UX experience around the booking tool and leave a business analyst to come up with all the requirements to fit the system. It's going to look at what the customer is doing before they get to the booking tool. What channels they'll use. Is it an app? Is it the website? Will they fluctuate? Will they call the call center when there's a problem? And some people will call it a process map, but it's a bit more than that. You will then go into those areas, so the call center, and you'll find out the problems they have or opportunities into that area. But you map it out. Like the way that I use it is what I call a blueprint. And, you sort of stages of a customer journey, and you use product management uses things like tools like jobs to be done or a customer journey map. But the jobs to be done, I've often found, don't go a little bit more. And I use a couple of things. I always relate back to a value proposition statement. Have we got one? Where do we reflect? It's also the art of learning not to go into a rabbit hole. And product management and everybody else will try not to go into those. They'll avoid them. They won't even reach down a rabbit hole. They go, oh, we know that's too big for us in the call center. We're not going to touch that. That's their area. You'll end up with other requirements that have nothing to do with the product or anything that we're wanting. But the art of service design is to go in there and learn enough, map out where they have got big issues, but not too in depth, and come back and say there are opportunities for future, so that what is a rabbit hole versus what's a rabbit warren. The difference.
100%. And I think a lot of this, from my experience, again, going back to that UX example, where they don't actually, in some cases, don't even look at the technology further down the line and its impact. It's all about that moment that they're either fixing or developing, and not necessarily how it integrates with everything else. And that's where that service delivery management tool, like you said, the blueprint, can help you actually map out, are there other systems that are going to be impacted and involved in this? And then who you need to bring on the journey with you to make it successful. And
part of that is one thing, a laneway in that big blueprint I like to put is, are there other projects or other things happening? So you can look at them, but it also helps project managers, or if you're working in a very agile environment where I've worked before, where you don't do projects and it's continuous development, they know where the impacts are, and you are able to kind of sequence or go, actually, is there a higher value if we help this team over here? That's enabling you. I also look at IT systems. Well, what products have we got in the background managing this? So for an example, in superannuations, and a lot of old trust systems are on old PAS, product administration systems.
Legacy systems, definitely.
And so what will often happen is product won't look at that. That's left for a BA, or we use it. They'll call out an existing risk and go, oh, it's on an old system. Then they try to fit into that system. Whereas service design will enable it and say, there's these issues here, and what platform. So you're able to look at it and go, actually, we won't be able to do this. We can see the future problems, so that we might have to reposition and say, actually, we're not going to build this new booking tool. What we need to do is invest in a new system and migrate our customers into that and work with the call center, because I'm talking about a booking tool, to enable the use of it first. And it's not 100% use, but it's enough that we really focus, rather than down the line, suddenly we've got to invest. It's a very hard in change management. But I think the biggest difference is that product design, which is product management, focuses on the thing and less on the people that discover it. While we do personas and who's using it and who would use it, we're not really focused on how they discover it and how they get help or how to manage it forward. Whereas service design is complete end-to-end customer journeys through all your channels, so call centers, IT, tech, the customer discovering it, the husband of the customer discovering it, and also out the marketing area. What other stuff do we do to promote this product today?
Yeah, and it's a bigger piece, because I think a lot of actual individuals are working on, say, product in that team itself. There's a lot of I don't want to touch service from experiences I've seen, because a lot of them think that's not my job. So you'll have a product person, like an actual product owner. They'll be like, oh, no, it's not my job to know service. Then you go to the UX person, it's not my job to know service, but like the mapping as well. And then you get this tension happening.
Look, I actually think that comes down to the language that we use, and it's the same with product. Product to an actual customer out there is a physical thing that I buy. Often we talk about product can be, and we're talking internally, can be the thing that I manage or the thing that I might build. And so you've got product marketing, you've got product ownership, whereas if you're working in banks and financial, that's the actual physical product that you're selling. So it might be the everyday bank savings account. But you'll have a product manager that's managing the customer experience, really. And then you'll have product design, and then you'll have service design, and you'll have service and operations. And service design is not the operational service. It's about the service of an entirety around a customer and the ecosystems that you're working with. And I do think, this is just me, the words that we use, and this is why it's hard when you're finding for jobs, the drop downs, banks ask what is your job that you do? We're not in a tailored list of things out there, because we fit in a world where we've used words to shortened words, because really it is, I'm a specialist that looks at products and uses service and design to create outcomes for a business and a customer. But I've just called that a product manager or a service designer. So it's very hard to explain to your grandmother what those two words are. But I could easily say I'm head of operations, or I am a call center specialist, and I fit into this drop down that would the bank ask me, because it is actually a category of work. Ours is used multiple categories and becomes hard, and it crosses over. That language crosses.
Exactly. And I think that leads us into our next discussion point. How do these two roles intersect? And why is it essential to ensure both are adequately covered within an organization? Because, as you said, there is some connection there naturally that occurs, but you also want to make sure the right people are making decisions and you don't have two people at loggerheads over it, for example.
I think what has happened, and this is my observation of the years of working in financial institutions or anywhere, that is, every time you say we need service design, people think, oh, this is a huge, big thing. A blueprint is massive. And it's because consultancies use service design. And for me, a lot of the time, they overdo it. They take too long on it. And it becomes this thing that is this massive document that's really hard to manage. Product managers, like what we do when we're looking at customers, actually do parts of service design. We do customer journeys. We do jobs to be done. It's all part of it. We work with a BA to process, map out stuff if we're working in tech to see how it all works. We intersect with UX designers and UI, because we're looking at the customer experience there. And it's an awkward one because everyone's gone, well, service design is what consultants do to see what all the problems are of the business, but it can be used for small things, big things. It fits. A product manager, I think, should be learning service design because it's a core to know your business, who you're operating with, and everything that touches around it. UX need to do a bit of service design. They already do, but learn more. But I think it fits in the product management group because whatever product you're delivering, you're really there to enable your internal customers. So you need to know how it's going to operate. If you want to talk to IT about a new function that you've created this whole new tool, and I'm going to go back to booking because it's in my head, they're going to need how to manage it and maintain it, and you're going to want to enhance it in the future. You need to know those tools. You're not the SME in it, the specialist, but you have enough around it. So when IT want to change things on you, if you're working in an enterprise, or your developer wants to do something and you're in a small startup, or a team wants to change, you have the knowledge to work back with it. UX come along with you on the journey with you, and you really need to involve them. They're not a separate function. Service design is involving everyone. There's lots of different ways you can do it through workshops or quick conversations. You can map it out really quickly on Miro if you want, but it's the key to that, and it is a product management function I think is missing and people don't learn it. It's the ability to focus outwardly from the point that you're starting with, how they come in, how they're going to go out, and understand that environment around a person or a customer so that you know that the point in the middle is at the right. Do you need to shift that a little bit to the left? Do you need to shift it away? Because otherwise, product can fail.
Exactly. And that's where you really need to get all those SMEs involved to help you making the best decisions possible and bringing and bubbling up all those potential opportunities, whether they're new product development or fixing a feature, whatever it could be. Because without their input, you're flying a bit blind without all that data coming in.
Now, I've watched SMEs can be dangerous, but they can be advantageous to you. But the problem is I've seen in the work that I've done is a lot of product or people in organizations go, oh, they just know too much and they've not allowed us to move forward. So they avoid them at the start. The trick I found with SMEs, especially when they've been there for long, that they're going to go through what I call the 7 stages of grief. If you tell them you're changing something on them, it's natural for anyone. They're going to either avoid, they're going to help, or they're going to tell you all the problems. But you've got to listen through that, and that's using empathy. What people often get confused is empathy and sympathy, and the reason they avoid them is because people are leaning into sympathy. So the reason I avoid is SME that's going to tell me too much and I'm going to be weighted down. I'm actually leaning into my head voice that's saying, oh, I've got to listen to all their problems, and I don't have time for that. Empathy is, okay, let's walk through, let them talk through this, find the gold nugget in there. Maybe they've got something. Let's involve them at the right point so that they feel like they're part of the journey or that they feel valued. Because the worst thing is every project or product I've ever been to that's avoided a SME at the start ends up being crushed by them at the end.
Agree.
You didn't find the gold nugget, and they're going to turn around to you on a day of testing because you're going to ask them to test it because it's a new function, and they go, this does not work because of this, and you didn't understand it.
I completely agree, and I've seen this road wreck myself.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's one of those hard lessons you potentially learn yourself along your career as well, having taken advice from, say, managers on how to deal with things. And then you've realized, oh, I should not have followed their advice. So then you've gone your own path in the future and amended how you do things.
And but sometimes you have to go down that because you have got pressure from the top, or you might be a business analyst doing this, and you've got a project management group that has deadlines, or there is other things happening around that SME group that you may not be aware of. They may be being completely cut as a function. But you have to push a little bit. You have to find out what's happening. You have to be inquisitive because it enables you to really look at a customer on the other end. And that's a lot of all this is empathy, which I lean into. And I think that word is being used. Everybody goes, I'm empathetic. You're not empathetic. You're just understanding someone because you understand how emotions work.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence is definitely something that is growing more and more, I'm finding, particularly with
Yeah.
the new ways of work and how consumers are now driving some of the demands for product and how it gets evolved within organizations. But for those that don't have any EQ, I think they're the ones that are failing themselves a little bit, myself personally, because they're missing out on some opportunities that they may have blinkers on about by being so maybe rash or harsh in how they talk or deal with people in situations.
And I think that's true. But on the reverse side, we have to, this is where empathy is different from sympathy or with
Mm,
buzzwords, right? To be the same and to be impartial is not empathetic. Everyone has personalities, everyone has ways of talking.
mm,
So, yes, some people can be really harsh, and yeah, we don't want that in a work environment. There's differences when, that's not right. But if you figure that that's the personality of the person and you can work within that,
mm,
then let it be, because otherwise all you're doing is sitting there and looking at a person and judging them rather than trying to just listen to what's being told to you and find out that nugget and move on. Don't
yeah,
waste your energy.
yeah.
It's always an interesting thing because, and I work with people that a lot of people don't like. I'm quite often been in companies and they go, "Oh, I don't like that person." And a lot of people don't, and you hear all the gossip. And I actually enjoy them.
Mm,
I find them, yes, I don't agree with some of their behaviors, but I find them far more interesting. Or there's a reason they're like that, and what goal can I come out? And sometimes they're the best stakeholders because I know they're problematic, but I'm on their good side.
and you're listening. I
Oh,
like to call that approach the chameleon approach.
yeah,
I talk to my teams about it as well for situations where you know you're not going to be acting your 100% authentic self because you
yeah.
do have to bend a little bit, but it's a way that you're still being authentic, but you're listening and reacting to that person's needs so that they feel comfortable in the situation so you get the best outcome.
I think you've mentioned just then, you're not leaning on your authentic self, but that is actually your
Mm.
authentic self. You've just not recognized it. And
Potentially.
the more that you do that, it self-reflect on yourself as
Mm.
well. I always do. I'm not 100% the best person. My work is not 100% all the time because I'm learning all the time. But if I can reflect back when things go wrong or how people are and then change because
Mm.
we develop and then that actually becomes my authentic self. It's not two-faced, which is what I use some straight up language a lot of the time. And I do swear, but I won't on this podcast. Straight up language puts a person exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Whereas if you divert around, so I always say to them, this is authentically who I am.
Mm.
Okay, I'm listening. I don't always agree, but that actually is human. That's authentically
Mm.
me to listen to somebody
Mm.
else. It's not natural for me to sometimes not interrupt or get annoyed, but
Mm.
if I practice it, it becomes more of me.
Yeah, I understand that point there as well. I suppose for me, I'm comparing my work self to
Yeah.
my everyday self.
So now I
And
have
that
an interesting take on that, but continue.
and that's where I am to a small degree a little bit different at work and how I engage with stakeholders than I would with, say, my best friend. And they know how I call them up in my little catchphrases I say to them. They would not be appropriate at work.
I think, look, I have always been who I am. There's no difference for me outside or internally in work.
Mm,
And this came back from years ago of doing the woman in gender and art representation and the feminist studies I did, but I was working with my tutor was Jermaine Greer at that point. But to be authentically yourself, you have to be authentic within whatever environment you're
mm,
and yes, professionalism is this word, it's a buzzword, or you have to be professional or dress, but find who you are in that professionalism
mm,
and keep with it. Because if you are a very different person in work compared to outside of work, you will struggle
mm,
because what will either happen is your friendship group will start to devalue you because you're so invested in this different character at work that you become engrossed in work. Or the reverse happens out and people meet you outside, or they go, I don't really know who this person is. And being professional is just actually a normal human person. If I am courteous to people at work or reflect on who they are, but I've always had this thing, I'm going to talk to the CEO, regardless of my position is all the way down, because it's a human. You are not my boss out of work. Work is an environment. I respect you. I'm not going to go and wander up and go, hey, mate, how was your weekend and things? But I'm going to naturally talk to you as a human being. And that's why I have this thing that I don't believe there's actually two different. There's a work self and a home self. I'm just who I am, but how do I behave in the right environment? How do I reflect with people? And how do I continue to be my authentic self throughout that whole journey so they know and trust me in both situations?
And I think that's where I say, like, I'm only just a slight degree off it. I still remember a very clear example where I used to work at ABC, and we'd had a fire evacuation. So everyone had to come out of the building. And as we were coming back in, after waiting quite a while, because you can imagine how many thousands of people, I was waiting for the lift and I was next in, and the lift opened.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have opened because they were trying to do an express lift with a very famous broadcaster on radio, very, very famous broadcaster, very controversial one as well, that most people in the street would probably want to go up and punch. And I just walked in.
This is, but I'll ask you afterwards.
And I just merrily walked in, and everyone that I worked with in my team just stood back and watched the doors close on the three of us, because it was the secretary, me, and this person. And the secretary comes up to me and she goes, how did you get in here? And I'm like, well, the door opened. And she goes, okay, the lock mustn't be working. So I just turned around and started talking to this guy. I'm like, so what brings you here today? And we just had this random conversation in the lift. But I was still very surprised that no one else, considering how long the queue had been, how long we'd been waiting to get back upstairs, refused to get in, even though the doors clearly opened.
Yeah. And look, there are people that would jump into that lift and should not, with the way that they'll talk to the person. I think you've done it with respect. And that's the whole thing. You're not there for something advantageous to me, which is inauthentic as well. If you're trying to get something, or you're using someone for a purpose, you become unauthentic, and it can reflect. And it's not a good look at work as well. And you have to respect things. But I mean, and I think all of this reflects back to service design again, because you are learning to do it throughout a whole organization. You're learning to do it through how all customers look at you or are looking at using a service. What's going on with them? Part of service design, jobs to be done, comes up a lot, and product management uses that. We all look at what's the job to be done for the person that wants to boil the kettle. Right? And we go, oh,
what's the list?
The job is they've got to fill the kettle. The job is they've got to have running water. The job is they've got to turn the kettle on. The job is they've got to get a cup. The job is they've got to get a tea bag. No, the job is they need to have time in their day. The job is the emotional thing, is the reason they want to have a cuppa is a moment to either relax or feel energized. So you look at emotional jobs around what the person is doing. Because if you build a kettle and they have to do all this thing and it's absolutely speedy, you're not giving any enjoyment to it. So, what are those things? It could have a reminder like, have you got the tea bag? Or it's already you put the tea bag in the pot, so it takes time out. So you're finding new ways. And product does that through a way of looking at jobs to be done, and it designs a product. Service design looks at it at a greater level and goes, what's the enjoyments around it? What are the ways that they get to it? And then you might look at it creates a new solution. One thing I've found with product is solutions are already in people's heads. And there's great things like Crazy Eights. People do that to come up with ideas, but you're creating a solution. You're not looking at what's the piece around it. What does the person really want? And if you've already got a solution in your head, you're going to find it very hard to divert from that solution as a product management, because you're set in your way. That's always the way it is.
I think that comes down to our next discussion point here about thinking more about understanding the customer needs. And having a distinction between how you can utilize personas versus archetypes. So, are you able to give us some discussion points around this one about how organizations should use these effectively?
Look, I think personas has been a buzzword and they've been overused. And organizations go, oh, we'll only have three because it's the maximum you need from a UX thinking, or it's all I need. And these are our core personas we use. This is Jim, and he's in the 16 to 25 market, and Jim has a bank balance of 45,000. Jim has got a job and he's got 2 kids. And a little bit of extra, he uses the app all the time, or he's digital savvy. But archetypes, the biggest difference is the information that's being presented and what you're looking at. And personas have a human face and a name and biographical information. So they try to make them a real person. Whereas archetypes are title, image, illustrating core behaviors of a group of people. Because if you singular down quite a lot and you use personas, there's nothing wrong with them. You become stuck on a person, which is often the way that I see this particular Jim who's 45, because I know a Jim that's 45 like that. So you're not able to look outside of your own context. Whereas an archetype, as we have, there's a lot of group of men, they range in age from 45 to 65. They have various bank balances. They're up and down in jobs. They're between Queensland, New South Wales, and Northern Territories. So it opens the mind a little bit more to look at a group, which is still the same as what you've done with persona, but it's not singular it out. It's become more open. So people actually, in some ways, can use archetypes and relate to broader people rather than using my mindset, which is I know a singular Jim that's 45. You go, actually, oh yeah, I know a couple of guys like that, but they all relate slightly different. Right? That's slightly different in their behaviors. So you're opening up to beer. And also you're putting yourself out of a situation, which I call the white ivory tower. I work in Sydney. I watch this. Everyone that does personas, everyone that does customer journeys, you're actually thinking of the environment that you're working in and you're stuck in Sydney. Even though that says that the person is, Jim's 45 and he lives in the Blue Mountains, you're still thinking Sydney. So you think all your access roads are really easy, I've done this for a bank where we looked at customers all the way across Northern Territories, all the way up into Broome, outside areas. And all they could think of is we've got to have this sent back to us within 6 weeks. And that's perfect time because everybody in my environment in Sydney, the White Tower, if you open it to a broader group, if we have people across Australia, some are in regions where there's no access to mail and it takes us, so you're giving more demographic, more information enough. You're going to shift it and go, well, actually 6 weeks, the person that's sitting way up in the outback, the mail's not going to get delivered. Service design will help you with this because you're going to map all this sort of thing out, how the customer discovers your product. They're not going to get it. And we're going to close a bank account on them because they've only just got the mail. They may be doing off-site, so you've got to give them more time. How if they have got it and we have closed, how do they react to it because there's not a bank nearby? But because you've sat in your white ivory tower in Sydney and you've reflected on a persona and you've attached it to how you think because it's in your own environment, you've forgotten everything else around. So I like archetypes. You can use archetypes as well, not just on people. If you're doing an enterprise change or you're doing a business transformation, what are the common archetypes of our business units? What are the common archetypes of our enterprise group makeup? So what's a small business? What's a big business? What's that? What's the common denominators? So that you can learn to shift in value. And that's why I prefer them. Personas are helpful when you're talking to a marketing person. And you might be great for using when you're doing a developer, but believe me, most developers I've worked with never care about the persona. And so it's just a marketing tool for me. I do use them, but I help with an archetype first. These are the archetypes. These are the common behaviors. These people have been using digital for 15 years, but they're not quick learners. These people are young. They are a quick learner. This group of people will use both a phone and a mobile, and also they won't do things straight away because everybody goes, they use their mobile, and everybody thinks, oh, on a mobile, they'll quickly accept. No, this group of people will look on the mobile, they'll go home, they'll save it, they'll come back, They'll go onto their desktop with their laptop when they're at home because they're watching a film, and they might do a little bit of work and they might be on the side. So it's not going to take 30 minutes for them to apply for this. It's probably going to take a week, but they're going to use all different devices.
I think one of the things as well, going back to the persona example, is I think a lot of people do just cut it too short.
Yeah.
There are other ways that you can make personas more valuable. And that's why actually looking out at your mosaic profiling and pieces like that can actually help you with those more cohorts and group understanding for behavior.
Yeah.
And then that's actually, in many cases, a universal language when you're talking to certain businesses that are helping you along the way with whatever you're building, because then they can understand, oh, okay, we can then help with this or this because we know they're these type of people.
Absolutely. But what I would challenge everyone on that, the problem with a persona, using the word Jim, and he's a male, is you're going to use conscious bias on the person that's doing it. So no matter what you've tried to show different ways, you're conscious biasing on groups of people. And it can actually, conscious biasing is leading into a bit of discrimination without people realizing it's not. So if you remove things or challenge, so for example, years ago, we did a lot of this and they had a lot of different people, personas, and it was to do with access into buildings. So of course, we're going to have wheelchair access.
Yep.
And we're going to have this, and they colored the people, so we had a white person, we had an Asian, we had African American. But where they put the disadvantage, and I challenged them, so they put the person in a wheelchair as African American. And I was like, look, put that as not a white person, because guess what? You're conscious biasing on a white person on a wheelchair, unfortunately, is you're going to favor them. The African American, you've double disadvantaged. So move that into a high net worth. Challenge the conscious bias of what people are looking at things with if you're going to do a persona like that. Because the reason for a persona is to make people think outside their box. It's not to make them think exactly how they think. And so I challenge always on that.
And I think there's also a bit of confusion in some cases about personas, because some people just think they're more of a branding tool, and that's actually this human you've made. So we'll call her Sam. She's 25 from Penrith or whatever. Blah, 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 blah. All those details filled in the little squares. Some people get confused that is going to be the brand voice of the company or the brand or the product.
Yeah.
It isn't. It's a piece in the puzzle to help with the development of the product or service. There is a completely different piece that is part of the brand that tells you the tone of the brand and everything like that. That's a completely different document, completely different use. But people are getting confused, that I'm finding about that as well, that they think that this persona is how I need to talk now as a brand. No. That's helping you understand your target market, but it's not telling you how you should actually have your brand talking.
Yeah, but that's why I prefer archetypes. They both do the same thing, but one is broader. It has a lot more information. You can also use it in organizations. So you're not talking to the reliability researcher, Rachel, right? But you can talk to the researcher. You could create an archetype that's called the researcher. And the common behaviors of you could go the reliable researcher, the sporadic researcher, they're archetypes. They're also but as personas, as soon as you sort of you could put customer quotes and things like that, but you're attaching a persona as a person, it's an individual.
Yeah, you pictured it already.
You pitched it and you're conscious biased. It's very marketing. There's a lot of resistance to it because it's, especially in product, because it's like, but we already do that in marketing, we already know. Or, why are you doing that? That's not what you should be doing in your job product. We need more things from you. Archetypes really help because you don't get that resistance as well. They kind of go, oh, that's great. It's pretty much the same, but slightly different. I found it's so much more easier to use with the C-suite. They understand it more. They don't go, this is just buzz, because the C-suite will want outcomes. So you're able to say, this is all the research. It's really being concise in a way, and it's not being biased on nature. Personas, they're just sometimes, to me, look, I love them, but they really are a marketing tool.
Yeah, and they can be also outdated very quickly.
Very quickly. I mean, especially when a name becomes old-fashioned, Shirley, the speedy researcher.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I haven't heard of Shirley. The last Shirley I knew was my nana. So you see what can happen in that. So that's why I prefer. I mean, I use them both, and
Yeah.
they're very valuable. But I think it's knowing your audience.
Mm. And that goes into so knowing your audience does make an impact to success for both the product
Yeah.
management and the service delivery. Can we talk a bit more about the initiatives that could help this when we're thinking about the audience and its impact?
Do you want to repeat that question again?
So knowing your audience,
Mm-hmm.
that has a huge impact on both the success for product management and also service management. So what kind of initiatives are there that we can do to help with knowing our audience?
I think the way I always reflect back to just stakeholder management to start with on all this, go and introduce yourself, let them know what you're trying to achieve, have a coffee with them, build a relationship and a rapport, and find out the issues they already have. It could be nothing to do with the project or the product that you're working on. Bring them into that they want to help you. And then you can start, those initiatives are like small workshops with the core cream. Let's do a workshop and break down all the issues you have in this area. Let's map them into this initiative, see where they could fit in. So you may know, they may not. That helps them discover where they may not. They might also help them go, well, we should spin something else up over here. So I always kind of do that. I think product and service design reflect in the same piece at this point. But it really is core is, knowing your audience is actually how do you find out about your audience? And also, if you ask the person working next to you, oh, what is this stakeholder like? Or what's this group like? You're going to be consciously biased by them. If that person is, oh, they're troublesome, they always bring up issues, or that's a really hard stakeholder, you can never get hold of them.
Yeah.
So yes, it's important to understand, especially if you're new into an area, but sometimes just reach out. Start doing the thing yourself. Go, who do I need to talk to? Okay, they are bad, but let me change that. I don't think they're like that. Let me see. So
coffee's great.
Yeah. Change your attitude as well. Like if somebody says something negative about somebody to you or a group, or it's going to be hard work, go, okay, cool, but let us change that. How can we do that? I'm going to make this happen. So you're starting positive thinking of yourself.
Exactly. And I just find coffee sometimes just makes a difference. Get away if you're in an environment where you can actually physically go out somewhere, go out from the office, go down to the local coffee shop. So it's almost like a neutral ground, and just go, hey.
I mean, one of the biggest things in that when having a coffee with somebody, and look, I'm guilty of doing what I'm going to say not to do, but you can start to talk about yourself. Oh, look, I'm here. I just wanted to have a coffee because I'm doing this project and I've got to do this. And I'm the lead service designer, or I'm the product manager. I'm going to, right? So all you've used is I a lot, and we unconsciously use it. We might go, oh, I've got this team. I've just joined. It's great. You might ask them the question, or what do you do? Or how can I, but find out about them. Oh, look, it's really great to meet you. I've heard good things about you, even if you've heard bad things. Always start with that. You're creating rapport, and then listen to them. And if that coffee goes way off track and they're talking about all other stuff, just listen. Oh my God, that's great. Hey, I know we didn't get quite to things. I'd love to chat more about that. I want to set up more time. I've also got this project going on. I need your help on it, but let's catch up. So you're creating a relationship, and you can do it with groups of people. Go and sit with them. I mean, operate call centers. Go and sit with them. Go and just sit down there and do your work and go, oh, I'll learn from this way. I know you're really busy.
Yeah.
You
don't double jack on it and just listen.
I can't pull you into big meetings. So how do I put myself in your shoes to find the gold? I've done it before in call centers. I've sat for a whole week just listening to calls and sitting with them on calls and watching and observing, rather than pulling them out of functions and putting them into workshops to map things or put PowerPoints or bullet points everywhere on a big service design. I've sat there and just observed them for a week, and that's the way I've got the information. And then later on, when they've got time, I've showed them what I've been doing, and they might point things out to me. They're time poor sometimes.
And I think with a lot of those discovery pieces and all the opportunities you find, that's for me where agiles really come in to help me be able to do better with managing this and having a process for going back and doing refinement. So, thinking about how agile methodology contributes to the adaptability and also the responsiveness of both product and service delivery, like that was my example of how agile has assisted with that,
Yeah.
because I really do believe that backlog, because you are looking at it so often and refining it and working towards the end goal that you may have, whatever it is, you're delivering this product at MVP, stage one, stage two, wherever it might be, you're getting all these people involved, blah, blah, blah. I find that just that process very positive from a product owner point of view, because then it's kind of like the task to be done, but it's also I can see movement and the whole team has visibility as well. But what are
So,
your thoughts?
I always switch things. I don't. Agile's a term that envelops many processes like Lean Six Sigma, Scrum, Kanban, task management, post-it notes on a wall. There are many processes into it, and it can be an adherent, I
An
can't think,
inhibitor.
inhibitor to things at the same time because
Mm.
it's too fluid. It's not really how other processes work. So where a team understands, then I work with it. Where I'm working back in service design with a team that doesn't, I have to bring them into a slight journey or show outputs that relate to them. Because one of the worst things on Agile is if somebody doesn't understand what a backlog is and you start talking about a backlog and show them a backlog of tickets, they're just like, right, they want an outcome. So projects want to know when you might deliver something. So I high level say we're looking in this period of having an outcome of this, but all this work here that I've been working with you helps me enable at this point. I'll come back and show you what we've come through with. I love Agile and I dislike it because I think in Australia it's been bastardized.
Oh, definitely. I'm guilty of that too. I use the pieces that make sense, but I
Yeah.
also have a very small team.
It's also over 20 years old,
Mm.
you know. And young people have changed. People do different things. So I'm always adapting and learning. But you work within an organization that has it, then you work with that organization on it. Don't push the road up. You can challenge, you can show new ways, you can move things in that might help, but don't go your way is completely wrong. It's interesting, that kind of conversation. We could take that up for a whole other topic. But what was there was a second point to that question that you asked.
It's the adaptability and responsiveness.
I've I've seen it respond really well, but when I've seen it respond again, I think it comes back to the point is understanding the unit or the group that I'm going to work with to then take that activity in. But also the way that I monitor it is a lot of agile, which is delivery focused and points, or I've got a backlog and I've outcomed. The outcome is I've got this released, which can turn into frustrations for people because that's a feature factory and then you're not doing product. You're just, not saying that you do that, Susan, in your way. But I monitor by the emotional intelligence of a team or the breakthrough I'm having with a stakeholder group, because it could be a month of frustrations, but then that moment, there's the aha moment, they start to turn around. That's the piece that I say is success, not the fact that I got all the requirements. Because I know that the next step is going to be easier where I can manage that. And I think that again comes down to empathy and learning, and it's actually people management, and people leaders often misstep doing that. I've watched that in organizations when doing business transformation and people management. When they're monitoring that the person in the group is picking up agile and the group is doing it, they have deadlines and dates. That's not people management. Good teams are made up of multiple personalities, multiple ways of they work things, how they achieve it. And you've got to gauge, one person can pick it up within a week, one person might have challenges within the third week. You've got people management is how do I do the best for them? How do I make the team work? Not how do I dictate? And
100%.
I the word dictate, but I find that a lot of agile practices are dictating, and they monitor it by how many points you have in the backlog, how many tickets you've got this, when have you got done this done. And that's dictatorship and it's micromanagement, whether people say it is or not. the way is, okay, the person here, you didn't get it, and I do need the user stories by this point for the development team, or I do need the service design map to a level. What's the outcome? When can I have it? Okay, what are you struggling with? Where can I help you with it? Okay, well, what's the way we can do it? And then the maturity and the level of that, or the development, because I struggle with that. I do think a lot of managers I've seen, whether they want to use the word or not, don't realize they're dictating. They don't want to, because they're monitoring by a output on a spreadsheet, or they're monitoring by an output of a document to them. Whereas they should be looking at what's the insights you've gathered, or what's the output that I will have, not the physical, like a Word doc telling me all the requirements. Do I have the gem? How can I speak to it? Because also you've got to remember your manager above you often has to talk above that as well.
Exactly.
Those nuggets to how to transform it. I mean, there is also times when you're going, okay, this person is lazy as, and, or they're not getting it, or maybe we need to look at where they could be better situated. And then sometimes you have to micromanage it, and sometimes you have to do, as a leader, be dictatorship in some ways. There's nothing wrong with it. It's using the wrong elements or not recognizing when I'm doing it myself.
And that was one of the things that I really tried to push when I was doing squad type work, and still am, is the individual should be able to tell me how long it's going to take. I shouldn't tell them, because they know their work best. So therefore, adding that into the process as well, that they've got that ownership of, I will get this back to you by XYZ. I will come back to you if I need more help or clarification. I will also have ownership if I need to go out to someone else to assist me with this, but I will commit to ABC. And that's how I try and foster my teams is, you own it. I'll help you with the first run of it. Just say it's something that we repeat over and over again, but they've never done it before. I'll help you with that first iteration, but the rest of it, they start being free. Have your wings. Be creative. Try to be more strategic with it now. How can we improve this to be different? But also at the same time, know what we need to deliver at the end as well, and what information we need to share.
Yeah, and also into that is like when I'm asking stuff, and I've seen this where I've been a business analyst as well, and you've got project managers that are going, by this date, I need the user stories. How many user stories are we going to have? How have you assessed the user stories? And I'm like, I don't know. This is right at the start of project management. I don't know how user stories are epics, but okay. And the next week, I'm going to go, okay, and the next week, you need to lock this down. There's other tasks and stuff that are happening. So I'm like, well, I'll teach other BAs, raise up the other things you have and go, what is the more important here? And I do, sometimes you've got two managers, like in groups like this, or sometimes scrums, you've got two product managers. Okay, what's the most important? I need help opening this.
Prioritize.
But otherwise, it's actually, you're telling me a week, it's actually 2 weeks, because it's not my capability as a person to write these or do them. It's the capacity I have outward. It's helping and managing that expectations around.
And what other pitfalls do you see when it comes to, or misconceptions, when it comes to service delivery in organizations?
I think there's a big misconception that operations own service. And there's a misconception that from big projects that Visios and process maps will do it all, and they don't. There's misconceptions that this unit owns this way of working. So I've seen where, okay, in operations, you need to have Lean Six Sigma expert. But over here in delivery is Scrum delivery. You know, the two philosophies between Scrum and Lean do not work. And product management doesn't really work very well with Lean Six Sigma, because product managers are taught to think all around and above. And Lean is taught to go and assess and quickly come with an output, which is actually what service design does as well. It's recommendations and things that can be changed quickly. Or service design goes also like a product manager, what is the future? So I think that is my biggest pitfall, is when people dictate how it should be. I've worked with I was working at West Super with a brilliant Lean Six Sigma master, and Veronique, she was amazing because she could take my way of thinking and we could cross because it was the same problems we're solving, but we saw it together. But she had an understanding, or if she didn't, I walked her through what I was thinking and why. And you can have debates.
Yep.
Don't be afraid of debates. That's the big downfall I see is people do not like to debate or have problematic problems within their group or their way of working because it's all got to work smoothly. Guess what? It's not.
No opinions.
An argument, a person being stubborn, having issues that like that, which creates dialogue, which creates people going off and thinking, or how can we solve this issue where we have two people not working well together because they're two different thinkers? It's going to enable creativity. It's enabling people to move and develop, and you're actually doing service design on a person there. It creates it. But if you dictate how it should work, again, and it's going to be all lean, or this person has got it, and we don't understand your point of view, that's the downfalls. If it's going to project things, that's a downfall.
And I think also sometimes it comes down to if you're in that beginning phase, you actually don't know till you start actually peeling away all the different layers of the organization to be able to do service delivery, because sometimes some people will hold that information and you've got to try and get through there and those barriers to get the information you need.
And I think that is a pitfall I've seen with service design work, and there's a big consultancies do it, right? They start and they peel the layers, like you said, everywhere. They haven't started with as an objective. And the first thing I love to do in that, and it's not really service design, is go, what's your value proposition? The business, and start from there. Not OKRs, not KPIs. What is your value proposition of this organization? What is it? Okay, does it need to rethink because you're challenging it? Like, that's one of the first to help my thoughts come about. How can I put a plan together? Because what's the issues in there? If I start from different channels and start mapping, I become too ingrained. And that is why that's the big consultancies do that. And, you end up with these massive service design deliveries. You manage all these backlog of things for delivery teams. Change this, the strategy changes up. It's not building a strategy. That's just throwing bricks and mortar at everybody and saying, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken.
Burning out too.
And it makes people devalue you because pointing out the problem. If you say, look, if we change this, or I've noticed this here, we need to adjust it. Like, I think we do have an issue in it. I need to concentrate in here because I need to solidify it. There is nothing wrong with showing up failures in organizations, but do it the right way. Don't do it where it's like basically, and that's why they don't like service design. Here's a map of all your issues. Here where you're going wrong. No, here is where we see opportunity. Here is where, and do it at a high level. Don't you bring it at a level as enough. Where do you want to concentrate? Work with your C-suite and go, okay, I've remapped this. If you're working with project managers or product managers and they're trying to get a timeline with you, usually this can take me 6 months sometimes, or 3 months. It can take me 12 weeks. It could take me a week. But I need to know enough to come back to you and go, this is how we'll do it. And these are the expectations.
Exactly. No, I think that's exactly how it is. It's working together, that collaborative piece to make it all one ecosystem together.
So call out, like one thing that I've seen is a pitfall where everybody goes, and this is UX will say the same thing. Oh, we've got the voice of the customer. We've got all the complaints. We've got everything.
It's only a tiny portion.
This is how many people love us. And I'm like, that's not true customer feedback. That is feedback that you've used. Learning, I love bad feedback, by the way. And I love to know, I learned this back in retail days. You can know when someone is a complainer and you ignore the complaint. And I found out in organizations, they don't know how to do that. Because a marketing manager will see all these complaints and this is really bad. And they'll go, oh, we need to fix this. You don't need to.
And it's just one complaint. It comes down to you find out it's just one complaint from one rando and the world's on fire.
They're always doing this. And they're always that problem.
Yes.
That's not and if you go back to your value proposition of the business, it's not a core person that we want here. And is there an issue? No. And you learn to ignore. It's the same with people that love all your things. You do the reverse. They're just a sycophant sometimes. And they want to, do it. And so you're going into this world that we're amazing. And there's nothing wrong with doing the Anthony Robbins, rah, rah, I'm the best in the world. But again, are you being a cult? So going through that and then UX will agree. I want to talk to real people. I want to hear what they're actually doing. I want to watch them do something.
Yep.
UX does interviews, and they'll always tell us, well, if I can watch the person doing it, I'll find out really what the problem is. If I ask them the questions, I'm not really getting it. I'm just asking them how. I think that's the one thing I always is a downfall is learning to not ask questions that lead to the answer that you want.
Good tip.
Like the data. So is this really true? How can I prove that I'm completely wrong? Right? Because I'll often make a statement and say, I don't think customers are doing that, they're doing this, but can you prove me wrong? Prove me wrong, or prove me they're doing something else. And using that, and service design needs to work with UX and product designers, but product designers or product management needs to envelop service design as a core part of the business, of their business, of what product is, what value it brings to the business. Because as you heard at the moment, product design or product management, everyone's moving them out of the businesses at the moment and everyone's worried. But I think it's because you need to show the value that you bring, and it's not just the value that I'm the glue between the mortar or that I help think of products, or no, the value is you bring all this together. You know how the ecosystems, you understand your customers. That's why UX and IT and big enterprises always stay there, because UX can know the customer and IT can know the functions, but you're the product management in the middle going, well, I know the product, I know who I need to sell to, but they go, well, why do we need you? I've got developers, I've got this, I've got that. And really bring that ethos into it and bring service design, encompass yourself across the business.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is definitely something that I think that's missing for some product managers, that they don't know how to do that, making them shine.
Yeah.
I have loved this conversation. I do have my one final question I need to ask you. And I ask everyone, what brand, any brand at all, best represents you and why? And it can be more than one.
So look, brands, I'm multiple. You got me to think about the city, but I'm going to go a bit diversion on you.
Okay.
My brand is Elizabeth Taylor.
Okay. You're going with you're the first person to pick a person. I like this.
I mean, there's multiple people I love. I mean, and I always look to people for different things, but I love her ability to admit where she's wrong, her things to always encompass who she is always and be unapologetic for it. Now, that doesn't mean you don't apologize when you're wrong or you do something, but unapologetically me, living the life I want to live.
Yep.
Doing the same thing through wherever I work, I am who I am, being a bit ballsy at the same time. Fight for what you believe in. And I think she's always encompasses that whole piece. I was just trying to find you a really good quote from her. And I'm just going to, her famous quote is, one of them, I don't pretend to be an ordinary housewife. There's nothing wrong with a housewife.
Particularly that era, though, that really resonates very strongly.
Even now, like, it's more, I am who I am. I'm not pretending. And I think that's who. And I'd say that's an ethos of me. I mean, there's many more you could ask for. Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent. I mean, at the same time, if you're asking on beers and drinks, I'm a 4X gold and a Victoria Bitters.
I love it.
I love my Chardonnays that are from the 90s, and don't give me champoise or sparkling wine. I'm all champagne.
I love that, because we are jigsaw puzzles. We've got multiple pieces. Some of them are identical, some of them aren't. And I love it that you really thought through.
We're contradictions to ourselves sometimes, but that's, again, why I love Elizabeth Taylor. Unapologetically her, brass, ballsy, beautiful looking, but at the same time can just take their mickey out of herself. I mean, and if you want to watch a really, really good film, go watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
I've read the book, and I think I watched it as well back at school as well.
Brilliant film. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, Susan.
Thank you. Do you have any final thoughts on service delivery that you'd like to share with the audience before we jump off?
I think my final thoughts is every organization needs to start looking at product and service design as being part of it. And I do think where it sits and how it operates. um, and bring it in, make it a natural piece of the business.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. And it's definitely something that's missing in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I mean, guess what? Service design can be used on organizational transformations. It doesn't have to be on customer. It can be how your C-suite operates together. It can be how your teams are layered. It's many things, but if you bring that in, you're a win everywhere.
Exactly. No, I appreciate this conversation, Ben. You have been amazing. And
Thank
to
you.
everyone else out there, don't forget to follow More to Marketing for more great podcasts and guests like Ben today.
I'm going to give a little plug. Don't forget to also on Thursdays, you can hear me on Kuri Radio on 93.7 FM. I think that's right. And on a program called Puha and Pork Bones, which I also do, which has nothing to do with product and service. Everything's Kiwi.
Not a problem. If you have a link, I'll drop that in as
I
well. So
will.
check that out so that you've got the link to go straight there and listen more to Ben.
Yes. See ya.
More to Marketing.